want to share with you some of my thoughts regarding worship, okay? Now, I know that there's been a lot of ink spilled on this, digital and otherwise, so I'm probably not going to really add much to what's already been said on this topic, but it is something that I have thought about a lot over the years, and so I just wanted to put this out there as being my 2 cents. Okay, so first of all, as Christians, we are to worship God. We're commanded to worship God. And I think one of the key aspects of that is that this is supposed to be participatory, okay? So in other words, worship is not a spectator sport. It's not something where you just sit and let everybody do everything else, but it is something that we are to be active and engaged in. And as an aside, this could be a whole nother video perhaps for some other time, but it's this participatory nature that I believe is fundamental to worship that negates the whole concept of Zoom church. And I know we've seen a lot of Zoom church with COVID and all that. Like I said, that's a topic for another time, but one major problem with that is there's no participation. You just sit there and watch. That's contrary to how worship should be in the local church. So that's kind of my premise right here. It's participatory. It's not a spectator sport. Now, in my opinion, a lot of the modern practices that we have imported into the church service go against this notion that, worship is something that all Christians should participate in. I think these modern practices make things more difficult for the average person in the congregation to participate in. First of all, you've got a worship team. They're front and center, and they're leading worship. But the problem is that I think that this fosters this spectator attitude. Think about it. You've got a worship team. They're up there. They're doing all the playing with the instruments and everything, and they're doing the singing. They're leading the singing. But it's really kind of emphasizing this entertainment aspect, or this attitude of entertainment. I don't think that's right. Now, if you've ever been at old churches, say 50, 60 years old or more, or even some of the really older ones back like in Europe or whatever, but the choir would be in the back of the building, or maybe up in a balcony in a choir loft. The musicians, the choir, the organist, all this stuff would be in the back of a church. Or in perhaps more modern times, certainly within my lifetime, I remember the church that I went to as a kid. The piano was on the side, the organ was on the side, the choir was on the side. They weren't dead center, but they were in the back or on the side. And you think about, why would you do it like that? Okay. Now, some people might say, oh, well, better acoustics or something like that. Not necessarily. I don't think it's just because of better acoustics. Because think about, especially in the old days before electronic amplification and everything like that, they had to rely on their understanding of acoustics to have the preacher's voice carry. So, especially in the older churches, the pulpit was where the acoustics were kind of optimized so the voice would carry. So if it were more in front, then the same would be true for the musicians, and that they would have better acoustics than in the back of the church. So I don't think that the reason why the old-timey churches had the choir or the piano, whatever, in the back was strictly because of acoustics. I don't think it had anything to do with it. But I think it's more to kind of reduce this temptation to view the worship, the choir, the piano and everything, it's to reduce the temptation of viewing those as entertainment. So in other words, if you can't see the musical performers because they're behind you or they're off to the side, then your focus is not going to be directed on them. You're still going to hear the music, but your visual focus is not on the musicians, and makes it easier for your focus to be on God. So I think that's a major reason why the old churches had that. Now that it's a completely different thing. You got a whole stage and everything, and like I said, the worship team, the band, the drums, the guitar, bass, whoever, piano, they're all front and center. So naturally your focus is drawn towards that. I think that's a problem. Because like I said, it fosters this spectator attitude, this entertainment attitude. Yeah, another thing is a lot of the modern songs now. It's sometimes we say contemporary Christian music or contemporary songs. Well, some of those songs have been around for 20 or 30 years, so it's if a song is 20 or 30 years old, it's really hard to think of it as being contemporary, right? But for lack of a better word, these contemporary songs, these modern songs, they're not as approachable, I think, for the average person. If you think about it, like a lot of times the melody it's harder to follow. There's a lot more ad-libbing, and it's more difficult to harmonize. Now, if you have a soprano voice and you can sing the melody, it should be not too bad. But what if you don't have a soprano voice? It's not in your key. How do you sing? It's uncomfortable to sing when it's not in your vocal range. So it's for a very narrow group of people. It's not accessible to the entire congregation, I think. Yeah, the modern songs, they're not as singable. They're not as tuneful. Also, if you go to a lot of churches, you can't find a hymnal. They're stuck in a closet somewhere. They're mothballed, if they have any at all. And so you're stuck reading the words on the screen. What about the notes? You don't have any notes to look at. You don't have any idea of how you can harmonize, how you can sing a different part if you don't happen to be a soprano. Or if they're singing a song that you never heard of before, well, you're out of luck. No notes. You have no idea what it sounds like. So I think these contribute to this non-participatory tendency with the modern music that is commonly used in worship now. Yeah, I have a few things to say, so I have to use notes. Another thing is that theology is certainly a concern. It can be a big concern. A lot of contemporary songs have sloppy theology, questionable theology. So you get songs like the Jesus is my boyfriend type of songs, kind of romanticizing the relationship between Christ and his church, which is inappropriate. It's viewing it the wrong way, I think. But like it's a very sloppy theology. Another common theme that you run into is these kinds of songs that talk about, oh, Jesus is so wonderful because he did all this nice stuff for me. It's certainly true that, Jesus works on our behalf, God takes care of us and all that. But the thing is, if that's most of what you're saying and the emphasis is on, God's so great because he did this for me. Well, I got news for you. God is great even if he doesn't do anything good for you. What did Job say? Job said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. So it's easy to say, oh, God's so wonderful because he did this for me. He took me up out of the miry clay and put my feet on a solid rock and all that. But what about when things aren't going so rosy? We need to learn to praise God for who He is instead of, oh, God is great because He's done such nice things to me. So it's not necessarily that it's wrong, but I think that it's a misguided focus. And I think a lot of songs tend to have this sappy sentimentality. And, you know, this isn't limited, bad theology isn't limited to contemporary songs. There are certainly plenty of older songs that suffer this same defect about sappy sentimentality. You got like In the Garden or something like that. So it's not a contemporary worship thing versus, you know, old-timey hymnal thing. Any song or any genre can have this problem, but it is something to watch out for. You want to make sure that your theology is has a proper focus and that it's not spreading out bad notions about God. Musically, okay, I'm a musician, so I do pay attention to this kind of stuff, but I've had a fair bit of training in classical music, but that doesn't mean that I listen to only classical. I also like different genres. I like jazz, and I like what's romantic music, like Wagner or something like that. But the thing is, I like a broad variety of music. I like some like rock and jazz, and say classical. I like Sousa marches. So it's not so much not really a genre thing, but I think a lot of the music that comes down the pike in terms of worship music, I think a lot of it is just plain schlock. For example, think about the song, a classic song, classic meaning it stood the test of time. A song like a hymnal, or not a hymnal, a hymn like A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, that is written by Martin Luther. So it's what, 400 years old, at least 400 years old. And he wrote it based on pretty much Psalm 46. So it's Bible based, it's scripture based. But you just think of the lyrics to A Mighty Fortress, and you think of the song. There's a reason why we are still singing that song 400 years later. Or Bach's Sacred Head Now Wounded, and actually that was based on something written by some monk, I think St. Bernard of Clairvaux, but don't quote me on that, but it was written long before Bach. But the thing is, that's another song that has stood the test of time, at least 300 years. That's what I mean by classic. A classic will last. It goes far beyond the time period in which it was written. So you compare those songs, Mighty Fortress and O Sacred Head Now Wounded, just as two examples. And then you think of some of the stuff that we're singing now in church and say, okay, that song that we sung last Sunday, will they be singing that 300 years from now, 400 years from now? Probably not. So, yeah, I think a lot of it, and like I said, it's not a genre thing, it's just a quality thing. Also, a lot of the stuff that we see in worship service and services now is based on pop music, let's face it. It's based on pop music. It shares the same nature as pop music. By that I mean that it's cookie cutter. It's very formulaic. It's like they say, okay, we'll use these 3 chords and we'll have a bridge here and we'll have a chorus and then let's repeat the chorus 2-3 times and then go back. Very formulaic. Very cookie cutter. And that's why all these songs after a while, they start to sound the same, frankly. But it's very formulaic, it's very commercial. It sells. Don't kid yourself. It's a business. Contemporary Christian music, even the Christian worship music, it's a business. If you have a church that follows all the rules about it, and they put the lyrics up on the screen, they should, by rights, have a little thing on the bottom that says license number, blah, blah, blah. They don't have that with hymnals. They don't have that with Mighty Fortress. Copyright rules are different in that. But still, it's licensed. It's a business. It has to be commercial. Okay. Yeah, enough about that. But yeah, that's why all the songs, after a while, they start to sound the same. And you're like, oh. So, yeah. So this music, because it is cookie cutter, because it is formulaic, it's a lot more imitative than it is creative. So, but musically, it's kind of boring. Another huge thing about the music is that the music tends to be used to manipulate emotion. It's true. You know it's true. Now, I'm not denying that music can stir your emotions. I wholeheartedly agree. When I listen to, for example, Herr, unser Herrscher from St. John's Passion, written by Bach, every time I listen to that, it just sends shivers up and down my spine. It does stir your emotions. But, well, talking about classical music, or classic music that is classic, there's a world of difference between Herr, unser Herrscher, and the stuff that you hear in the average church, in your average church on Sundays. But yeah, music can stir the emotion, but the problem is when people use music deliberately to stir emotions. They're trying to manipulate things, okay? They're trying to get you in a certain frame of mind. And so you have this problem when people start seeking that emotional high more than they seek God. Oh yeah, this music worship, this worship band, they're so great that blah, 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 blah. Or sometimes you hear about, after a particularly emotional music service, then sometimes you hear the preacher or the music leader say, well, God certainly moved today with the worship. What, are you trying to say that if people don't get emotional, then God's not at work? When you're talking about church, okay, when you're talking about congregational worship, the focus should not be on, oh wow, I got a really good feeling from the music. Feelings come and go. Music, as powerful as it may be, music cannot change people. It's the Word of God that will change people. It's the Word that should stir us up. Okay. Think about, what does God say? God says that, my word shall not return unto me void, but it will accomplish that for which I sent it to. He didn't say that about music. He said that about the Word. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so that leads to this next idea that I have, is that, worship. Today, in the minds of many people, worship is synonymous with the singing part of Sunday morning. But that's really a modern concept. That's not how it's supposed to be. Worship is not just the song part of the service. The worship is supposed to be the whole thing. So it's supposed to include the Word, okay? As we said, why? It's the Word that changes people, not the music, okay? It's the gospel. The gospel that is the power of God unto salvation, not the music, okay? Now there's a saying, I guess, if you will, kind of emphasizes this, and it's something to think about. What you win them with is what you win them to. Okay? So in other words, think about what is attracting people to your church. Are people attracted by the music, or are they attracted by the preaching? Maybe both. Okay, that's fair enough. Which attracts them more? The music or the preaching? If you have visitors coming to your church, what do they say? Do they say, "Oh wow, the band is really great. I just got so uplifted by the music"? Do they say that? Is that the first thing out of their mouth? Or do they say, "Man, that preacher's on fire. He really knows his Bible. He really gives us the Word of God straight as it is. He doesn't pull any punches. I really appreciate that." What's the first thing coming out of their mouth? That will tell you what attracts them. Are they attracted by the preaching of the Word? Or are they attracted by the music? Another way to think about it. If the worship team were to get swallowed by a black hole, how many people would still be coming? How many people would quit coming and go to some other church? Or, kind of similar, if somebody took away all your musical instruments, but the drums and piano and the guitars and everything, it was all completely gone, and you sang only a cappella. A cappella meaning unaccompanied. No musical accompaniment at all. You just had to rely on the voices of the people in the congregation. How many people would still come if that were the case? What's attracting them? What you win them with is what you win them to. And all this boils down to two fundamental views on worship. The first is what is called the normative, easy for you to say. The normative principle of worship. There we go. And in a nutshell, the normative principle of worship says that which is not prohibited is allowed. So in other words, you can do pretty much anything you want, as long as it's not blatantly sinful. Blatantly sinful. As long as it's not sinful, okay? You can do it. So you want interpretive dance in your worship service? Fine, that's okay. It's not prohibited, so go ahead, go right for it. Do you want stage lights and a fog machine and all that? Fine, go ahead. You want to play AC/DC? Fine, go ahead. It's not prohibited, so go ahead. That's the normative principle of worship. Contrast that with the regulative principle of worship. And the regulative principle of worship says that which is not prescribed is prohibited. And at least historically, this has been pretty much the Reformed position. For example, the Westminster Confession of Faith and the 1689 London Baptist Confession of Faith both say essentially the same thing regarding that. So I'm going to read that here. Of religious worship and the Sabbath day. Just to give you an idea of this regulative principle of worship. Okay, the acceptable way of worshiping the true God is instituted by Himself. So in other words, God's the one that tells us how to worship acceptably. And so limited by His own revealed will that He may not be worshipped according to the imaginations and devices of men, or the suggestions of Satan under any visible representation or any other way not prescribed in the Holy Scripture. So in other words, God didn't say do it this way, then we have no business doing it. That's the regulative principle of worship. And you might say, well, gee whiz, that sounds kind of strict, that sounds kind of harsh. Well, if you've read in Leviticus 10, the story of the sons of Aaron, it seems kind of harsh too. The sons of Aaron were Nadab, I don't know why they couldn't have normal names, right? But Nadab and Abihu, they were the sons of Aaron, okay? They were consecrated, being sons of Aaron, they're consecrated to the priesthood and all that. They were set apart. Well, what did they do? They offered up, the King James says strange fire, and if you look at modern translation, it says profane fire. They offered up profane fire to the Lord. What would profane be? Profane is the opposite of sacred. Sacred means set apart. Profane means common or ordinary. But it says that Nadab and Abihu, Nadab, okay, I'm getting mixed up. Nadab and Abihu offered up profane fire to the Lord. And the thing is, God did not command them to do that. It could have been something, who knows, we don't know for sure what it could have been. And I don't know, I kind of doubt that Nadab and Abihu woke up one morning and said, well, let's see, how can we tick God off? Let's do this for in the service. I don't think they did that, but they, well, you know, hey, this is a good idea. Let's do a little bit of this. Let's add a little bit of that, whatever it was. But the thing is, God said, I didn't tell you to do that. And what happened? They were struck dead by God. So this idea of, you know, God says, you worship me in this way. That's how I want you to worship me. Don't go trust in your own imaginations. Oh, this sounds good. Let's try this. Nadab and Abihu got struck dead for that, okay? So just something to think about. And what I'm going to wrap up this here with is, okay, John Wesley's directions for singing. Okay, I was raised a Methodist, okay, so I grew up in the Methodist church. And it used to be the case, I imagine it still is, I haven't checked a recent hymnal, but it used to be that every Methodist hymnal had two things in the front. The very first hymn was "O 4,000 Tongues to Sing," and right before that was John Wesley's directions for singing. So I'm going to wrap up by going through these and just pointing out a few things. So it starts off, and it's written in kind of old-timey language. This is from the mid-1700s, so just kind of look beyond that. Directions for singing. That this part of divine worship may be the more acceptable to God, as well as the more profitable to yourself and others, be careful to observe the following directions. So all that's the preface, okay? And notice he says, you know, the goal for these directions is that, 1, acceptable worship to God, 2, profitable not only for yourselves but for others, so profitable for the whole congregation. Remember, I started off with the idea of worship for the Christian. It's participatory. It's not a spectator sport. He's touching on that. Okay, so here he's got seven directions for singing. Number 1, learn these tunes before you learn any others. Afterwards, learn as many as you please. So in other words, he's saying, you know, there should be some standard repertoire, if you will, some standard set of songs. Let's concentrate on those first. You can learn others later, but do these first. Number 2, sing them exactly as they are printed here, without altering or mending them at all. And if you have learned to sing them otherwise, unlearn it as soon as you can. Okay, so in other words, there should be some sort of standardization of the tune itself, okay? Don't go embellishing it, okay? Don't go adding little flourishes, but just kind of stick to it. That way everybody can be on the same page, literally, right? But everybody can sing along to the same tune, okay? Instead of worrying about somebody adding their own whatever, or this is the way I learned this, or whatever. Number 3, sing all. See that you join with the congregation as frequently as you can. Let not a slight degree of weakness or weariness hinder you. If it is a cross to you, take it up, and you will find it, and you will find a blessing. So in other words, it's, again, it should be participatory for everybody. Don't just, I can't really sing that well, and so I'm not going to do it. No, just go ahead. Take it up, and you'll find it a blessing. Just, take up that cross. But everybody should sing, okay? Number 4. Now this one, to modern ears, it sounds a little odd, but I like it. It's kind of special. Yeah, number 4. Sing lustily and with good courage. Beware of singing as if you were half dead or half asleep, but lift up your voice with strength. Be no more afraid of your voice now, nor more ashamed of its being heard, than when you sung the songs of Satan. Yeah, sing lustily. Okay, so in other words, it's an old-fashioned term, right? We don't quite use it like that now. But in other words, sing heartily. Don't sing like a wimp, but sing with strength. He says, lift up your voice with strength. So don't sing, that's not singing lustily, okay? Do not be afraid. Be no more afraid of your voice now, nor be afraid of, nor more ashamed of its being heard than when you sung the songs of Satan. You have no problem singing out Hey Jude or whatever at the top of your voice. So what's to stop you from singing out Christian songs, Christian hymns with that same confidence? Also, I kind of like it says, beware of singing as if you were half dead or half asleep. So, yeah. A mighty fortress is our God. Take your pick, half dead, half asleep. Both of them are equally bad. That's not what it's talking about, right? So in other words, be confident, be bold when you sing in a good way. Okay. So that's fun. Number 5 is also fun. Sing modestly. Sounds like a little bit of a contradiction, but we'll get into that. Sing modestly. Do not bawl so as to be heard above or distinct from the rest of the congregation, that you may not destroy the harmony, but strive to unite your voices together so as to make one clear, melodious sound. So there's this emphasis on unity. So when he's talking about sing modestly, do not bawl. So in other words, no prima donnas, okay? Everybody's the same. So yeah, you should sing with confidence and with force, but don't do it to the point where you're sticking out like a sore thumb compared to everybody else around you. You want to sing in harmony, not necessarily in unison, but in unity. Sing together as one voice, okay? Number 6, sing in time. Whatever time is sung, be sure to keep with it. Do not run before nor stay behind it, but attend closely to the leading voices and move therewith as exactly as you can. And take care you sing not too slow. This drawling way naturally steals on all who are lazy, and it is high time to drive it out from among us and sing all our tunes just as quick as we did at first. Now, to be fair, this is probably more an issue with a cappella singing. With if you have a good song leader, if you have musicians and stuff, they should help keep time and keep everybody in tempo. But sometimes, occasionally, you do have like a verse or two. You might have noticed this, but you have a verse or two where the accompaniment drops out and then everybody's singing a cappella. And the problem is people are not used to that, and it's a very common characteristic or habit or whatever that people, as the verse goes on, they start going slower and slower. They're not good at keeping the beat. So this is what that's talking about primarily. Okay, and then last one, number 7. And to me, this one is really the crux of the matter, the crux of what I've been talking about in this video. Above all, sing spiritually. Have an eye to God in every word you sing. Aim at pleasing Him more than yourself or any other creature. In order to this, attend strictly to the sense of what you sing, and see that your heart is not carried away with the sound, but offered to God continually. So shall your singing be such as the Lord will approve of here, and reward when He cometh in the clouds of heaven. And that's what I'm talking about. Sing spiritually. So in other words, have your focus on God when you sing. Have an eye to God in every word you sing. The worship should direct you to God, not to the people on the stage, not to, oh wow, this really uplifts me or stirs my emotions, but it should point your focus Godward. Aim at pleasing Him more than yourself or any other people, right? So pay attention to what you're singing. Pay attention to the words. Pay attention to the theology that's presented. Attend strictly to the sense of what you sing. And notice he even addresses the issue that I said about emotional manipulation in music. And see that your heart is not carried away by the sound. It's exactly what I said. It's very easy to get stirred up emotionally. That's wrong. That's not what should be stirring you up. But keep your eyes on God. Okay? So that's kind of what I wanted to say about worship. Worship is to God, not to others. And so there's so many things that can distract from that, and I think we have to be careful about that. So, those are my thoughts. Do you agree with me, or do you have some other observations? Put them in the comment box, and we can chat there. Bye.